Welcome to the Shackle project. This episode I have designed from scratch a completely new design set of shackles to replace the originals on the Dodge truck because the originals are shot and they're far too complicated to remanufacture, so they're going to one side for now, and I've come up with a new solution that will get me going to start with. I may further down the line decide that I want to go back to the original style, but we'll cross that bridge further down the line. So without further ado, stay tuned. I designed it all, modelled it all up on the computer, and now a load of stuff's turned up in the post, and I've got a lot of machining to do. But I'll go through what's arrived so far. I have a big bar of nylon, which is what I'm going to be making the bushes out of. This piece of steel here is going to be what I make the centre pins out of. This piece here is actually not related to the shackles, but the U-clamps that go over the rear springs require tubes for the bolts to go through, so basically I'm just going to make 8 tubes out of this for those, which you'll see in this video as well. I have a box just full of nuts, bolts, washers, you name it. Oh, and a load of grease nipples, because I've got to put grease nipples into these shackles. And then the most fun part is this box. The side links of the shackles have all been laser cut for me, so these are well, near enough ready to go. I've had them drill these holes or laser these holes out undersized, so I'm going to drill them out and ream them on my drill press to make sure that they're absolutely perfect. But yeah, it just seems so much easier to have these laser cut rather than hacking a chunky hunk of steel up myself, which would have taken forever. And they're all exactly the same, perfectly made. These are the rear ones. That's a bag full of slightly shorter ones, which are the front ones. And then I've pretty much got everything I think I need to do to make the entire thing. I will show you what it's going to look like on the computer now. And then I'll get on with turning all of those round bits into something useful. Okay, so I've set the lathe up. Haven't used it for a little while, so hopefully she's all good. But this is the tube. I'm going to make the tubes first, and then I'll get started on the shackle project. So I'm basically just going to dice 8 of these at the right length, and then that's done. Really straightforward. There we go, 8 of them, all exactly the same. I'm going to stick them through the sandblaster so that they have a good finish of them that will help paint adhere to them better. And then I'm going to paint them gloss black so they match the springs that they're going on. Next step is to start, well, essentially doing exactly the same thing on this steel rod. I'm going to make 8 of these, much the same as those, but once I've made all 8, I've then got to turn them into this. So they will have a thread on one end. You see there's a hole that pokes out halfway, and the hole goes all the way down the middle. You can just about see in there. And then there's a thread in the end for the grease nipple to go in. Okay, so these now have a grease tube drilled all the way up to about there, each one, and then they have a thread in the end to accept the grease nipples which will go in. So that's what you just saw then. Next stage is to turn this end back on all of them and put the outer thread on for the shackle nut. Next job on the list is to put threads on the ends of every single pin for the nuts. I'm going to do that in the lathe over here. So what I've done, this basically is just set up to act as a round part holding vise. So I've got this extra jaw in the chuck which is locked in the tool post. So the chuck is fixed and can't rotate, and then I've just got a key to open and close it. So it should make the process nice and easy. And then I can use the tailstock, which will press up against the die that's cutting the thread on the pin, and basically the pressure from this helps the die stay flat, so you end up with a very square thread. It's too easy to cut a wonky thread on a round part, so it's just a neat little trick to aid keeping it perfectly straight. There's the die. So just hook that there. And then literally just turning the die here and winding the tailstock in just to apply pressure against it as the die goes on to the bar. And that makes sure that the die has gone on dead straight. And then once it's started going, it will continue in a straight line. There you go. 1 down, 7 to go. So there's only one more step to do on the pins, and that is to drill the grease output hole on each one halfway along. So that's that little hole there on the model. Did you enjoy watching that, Doris? Anyway, there's all of those with the special holes in for the grease to go through. All 8 of them are done. That's the pins done. They just need welding into the shackle plates now. So next thing on the list for the shackles is to take 2 rear links and 2 front links, and I've got to drill and ream them to 12mm. These will be the shackles that the pins are welded into, so the holes have got to be big enough for the pins to go through. These are welded, and then the ones on the other end bolt over the other side of the springs. So pillar drill time. So these holes are almost 12mm, but not quite. That's where the reamer comes in. And that's this guy, if you've not seen one before. And it will make those holes exactly 12mm. Scrap that, I'm doing it in the drill. So the next job is to do the next 4 side links, and these ones are being bored out to 10mm. Next job on the shackle list is to make the nylon bushes. So this is what they'll look like. There are 16 in total. I've done myself a little drawing so I can have it by the lathe. 1 nylon bar. And if I've done my maths right, there should be 16 bushes in this. Well, problem number 1 encountered. The nylon bar doesn't fit through the headstock on the lathe, which is annoying. That means I'm going to have to chop this up into smaller bite-sized chunks because I can't machine something that long. Okay, just squaring up my parting tool, and then I'm going to part this big old chunk off here, and then I'll work on a much smaller 5-inch piece. That should do me 4 bushes, I think. So 5 inches for 4 bushes, and then another 5, 5 and 5, and then it will be in 4 sections by the time I start using each piece. There we go, and there's the first bush. Here's a quick update. These are all of the chassis bushes done, all 8 of them. Now I've got to make 8 virtually the same for the springs. I've marked the shackle plates up now. You can see the circle on each one. That's where the nylon bush is going to touch. And I want to round the edges in between the 2 circles. So that edge and that edge on each one. And then also all the way around this edge. Just to give it a little bit more of an authentic look, because this modern laser cut sharp edge is all just a little bit too modern looking. That's the smoothing of the edges done. You can see it rounds off just along the edge between the 2 circles here, and then all the way around on the back side. That's the same for all of them. Now I'm going to put them all through the sandblaster to get rid of the mill scale that you can see, that horrible finish all over there. And that will make it really difficult to paint, so I'm going to get rid of that. Sandblasting complete. They now look like this. And so the next step is to take 2 pins, 1 shackle plate, and put these through the holes and weld them in position. So I'm going to have to very carefully set these up and align them all so that I can weld them so that we get the exact right gap between these 2 side links. Four shackle units, minus the bushes. So it's just a case of setting that gap and putting a weld around each one of those. Better get some primer on these before they go rusty. Back in the spray tent again, got some outstanding bits for the suspension. So these are the rear spring U-clamps, the plates that go underneath and other U-clamps, and then over here the 4 shackles. So these are basically finished, they're in primer. All that's to do now is stick some gloss on these bits and then they can be fully assembled with the grease nipples, bolts, washers, bushers, and eventually put on the chassis when all the other bits are ready. So the shackles are fresh out of the spray booth. I need to take all the masking tape off and the little hanger wires and everything, and then these are the little spacer tubes that I painted whilst I was at it, which go here in between these 2 plates on the leaf spring. So there's 4 per leaf spring, and it's just on the 2 rear springs, so this one and this one, that they'll go on. So I can go ahead and pop them on now as well. Okay, so we have bushers, nuts, bolts, washers, grease nipples, and then these are the bolts that are going with these little tubes here. There we go, 2 rears and 2 fronts. So the only real difference being that that's I believe 2 inches apart, and that there on the rear ones is 3 inches apart. And I've just trial fitted these little tubes, spacers, with the little bolt through on the rear spring, so you can see how that goes. They fit nicely. And they don't have horrible rusty seams in them, so they won't fall apart like the originals did. And they look exactly the same on the outside. So that's good. And now I'm going to take one of the front springs from under here to the chassis and just line up with the shackle just to show you exactly where it goes. And then basically we're done. Chassis, spring, shackle. Just going to hook the spring up in the front like that. I think you can see that clear enough. And then basically I'm not going to fit this, but the spring sits there underneath the chassis, and this shackle, I think we'll go with grease nipples on the outside, but I need to double check that, will sit there and go between the spring and the chassis, which provides the motion backwards and forwards as the spring flexes. So as you go over a bump and the spring bends, the spring straightens, becomes longer, and this shackle moves backwards to allow for that. Without that, the spring would be rock solid and it wouldn't budge, so it would be completely useless. The only other thing I wanted to get done before the end of the video is to literally assemble these in a little pile, just like I did on the CAD model that I showed you earlier, and I'll show you again now. It's a bit crude, but there we go. Okay, with that done, that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any questions or suggestions, pop them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer. Do subscribe to the channel if you want to get updates on future videos. The next episode, I'm not entirely sure what that's going to be. At the moment I'm working on quite a few things at once. So the chassis is kind of halfway through prep and painting and all that sort of stuff, so it's possible that might be the next episode, getting the chassis finished and painted, which would be really cool because that will be the first major step to actually getting the truck assembled again after having ripped it to bits last year. And then over this side of the workshop, I've got the rear axle and differential assembly, so I'm fighting my way through removal of bearings and things like that. There's lots of stubborn stuff and things that I'm going to have to try and replace, whatnot. So yeah, watch this space.